how would you talk about your general relationship to your subjects? I mean, I said before that you'd written about Mozart, Tolstoy, Meister Eckhart. You know, it's a kind of the dream list, really, of people to be in dialogue with. Are you more interested in the art of writing, or is it actually about a commitment to the things that you write about?
Well, that's a very good question. I am committed to the art of writing. I mean, I think writing in itself is a spiritual event. Whatever you're writing about, it doesn't really matter. You could be writing about a traffic system, or you could be writing about Tolstoy. I think good writing is a spiritual event in itself. And it's the sea that carries, it's the sea that carries the story. The story is the ship, and the sea is the writing. And so I do believe in writing for its own sake. And to be honest, if the writing's good, I don't really mind what they're writing about. I'm not too bothered, because I think writing is a spiritual event. But then, of course, if you can ally it to something that has value and strength in itself, it becomes a much bigger event. So, I mean, I think Hilary Mantel is a brilliant writer. She just writes very well. But when you ally that to the story of, Thomas Cromwell, then it becomes something even stronger. But the writing is brilliant anyway, but married to the story, it becomes even stronger. And I think, so for me, yeah, I'm always looking, writing is a spiritual event, but if I can find something to attach it to, then it becomes stronger.
I do, of course, want to ask you about your most recent subject, none other than Jesus. There's a topic, but I'm aware that you're no longer a priest and that you haven't been for a little while now. And I hope you'll forgive me from quoting from your blog, but you've written that you left the priesthood knowing, this is the quote, knowing my soul needed some time to cry, some time to die, some time to start again. There was so much in my cupboard I had no need of. And I quote that, Simon, partly to acknowledge that this must have been a difficult time of your life, but also because I think many people recognise the complexities of being part of or not part of a faith community. What role did writing, or perhaps reading even, have for you as you moved through that phase of your life?
Well, I don't think I wasn't writing at all then, really. And I probably didn't write for about 10 years. I think it was just, the end of the priesthood, I was a priest for 20 years in London. And it was a sense that this adventure has ended. And when being a priest isn't an adventure, then that's time to go. I mean, most people start off in the priesthood imagining it'll be there for all their lives. And I certainly did. But then after 20 years, I had the unsettling experience of discovering that the adventure was over and I just had to leave and I didn't know where I was going to go to. And that's always difficult. But sometimes, sometimes guidance is just negative. We just know we have to leave. And that's what I did. And I worked in a supermarket for 3 years after that. Because no one wants to employ an ex-priest. They really don't. And so I stacked shelves in the supermarket for 3 years. And actually, I really enjoyed that, mainly because it felt like I was treated as a human again. I think when you have a dog collar around your neck, you either get elevated too high or you get elevated too low, if you can be elevated too low. But people don't actually relate to you as a human being. They just see the dog collar, and therefore lots of transference takes place on towards this dog collar. And it was very nice in the supermarket just to be stacking shelves and not to have a dog collar. And I was sort of human again. That was a recovery.
Some of the books that came out of that period of your life, as I mentioned, were the imagined conversations books.
Yeah.
That kind of put you in a fictional dialogue with Tolstoy, with Van Gogh. I have to mention Julian of Norwich, the 14th century anchoress and mystic, whose Revelations of Divine Love is the first book to have been written in English by a woman that we know of. I mention her because today, I'm sure you know this, happens to be Julian's feast day for people with liturgical minds. Why turn to people like that, people of the past, to explore the meaning of life?
Yes, well, I mean, I think I've always felt that we stand on other people's shoulders, and really there's nothing new under the sun. So where there's been wisdom in the past, I do like to go back and find it. And with the conversations series, conversations with, the thing about those is that I don't imagine their words. I just use only their words, and I turn it into a conversation. So I can only do it with people who've left some writing, letters and things like, Mozart left a lot of letters. Tolstoy left a lot of letters as well. Van Gogh, he left a lot of letters. So you can really get to know these people. You can know them intimately from their letters, from their writings. And I just wanted to turn it into a conversation, so that, in a way, to give access to these people as people, as opposed to as a novelist or as a painter or as a musician, actually to meet them as people. And I suppose that was the therapist in me. Whenever I come across anyone, I'm looking to see what makes you work, what makes you the human being that you are. So there's something beyond their celebrity for being a novelist or a painter or whatever, but actually, who are you as a human being? And that's what I was really interested in.
It's a fictional account of the life of Jesus. And I really, I guess, want to spend a bit of time exploring that with you. What was different about writing about him, of all people, compared to, say, writing about Julian or writing about Tolstoy?
Well, I mean, Julian was a bit of a break for me, because I wrote my Julian. That was a novel, and I wrote it in the first person because I wanted actually to get inside Julian and to understand how Julian works. So it's written in the first person as Julian writing. Now that is a novel as opposed to using words, historical words. And it was the same with Jesus. I think with Jesus, obviously Jesus is so often behind a sort of paywall of doctrinal statements that it's quite actually difficult to access him as a person. And I've always been interested. I've never really been interested in a religion about Jesus, but I'm very interested in a religion of Jesus. Like what made him tick? What gave him such resilience? Where was this light that how did he do what he did? Because I mean, he faced massive difficulties as a human being. And where did his strength come from? And so it was about accessing him. It was about meeting Jesus, as opposed to meeting this sort of avatar for niche faith adventures, which is what churches present of Jesus. I mean, it's very difficult. I have great sympathy for the church, because the church is an institution. But of course, Jesus rips down institutions. He didn't leave any institution standing. Least of all the temple. He didn't, and so it's very hard for an institution which needs borders and boundaries and you're in and you're out sort of statements to look after the story of Jesus, because he ripped these things down. He had no interest in them. And so how an institution can look after the Jesus story is questionable.
You've talked about how difficult it is to get to kind of Jesus, so to speak. There's any number of ways that people have tried, like everything from a kind of very mystical attempt to commune. There's the kind of the detailed historical work that maybe ancient historians do. How did you go about your research for this book?
Yeah, well, I did a lot of research in terms of the historic. I mean, I've used 6 Gospels, so the 4 Gospels in the Bible, in the canonical Bible: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. I used the Gospel of Thomas, which of course should be in the canon and isn't.
That's an old debate.
And I also used the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, because Mary Magdalene is one of the key figures in it, which again is. And I mean, the thing about, so I did that, I used all those, but I also, obviously, historical background was very important, the state of Palestine at the time and all that sort of stuff. But I'm very aware that everyone, in a way, when I'm writing a novel about Jesus, I'm very aware that everyone's Jesus is imagined, not just mine, everyone's, because, everyone has to read what they read, hear what they hear, and then they come to some sort of imagined picture of Jesus. And it might be a rather depressed fellow walking around with a crown of thorns on his head, or it might be a sort of pushy evangelist saying, well, you've all got to do much, much better, you know, or it might be a rather avoidant fellow who doesn't keep geese, so doesn't have to say
surely he was a hippie, Simon.
Well, he was a or, you know, he was a hippie, or he was, you know, in North America now, he was a white, clean living, you know, advocate. It's just, who's Jesus do you want? So in a way, everyone's Jesus is imagined. The question is how well it's imagined, I think.
That raised the question, because, I mean, novelists have attempted this enterprise before. I mean, we've had Dan Brown's Da Vinci Code, which I have to admit I didn't read. Philip Pullman's Good Man Jesus and the Scoundrel Christ. Anne Rice's bestseller, Christ Our Lord Out of Egypt. I mean, The Last Temptation. But there's any number of depictions of Jesus circulating on the page, or on a stage, or in musical theatre, or, you know, here in Australia, we've got everything from kind of the Bushman's Mate, Henry Lawson's Christ of the Never, through to Reg Mombassa's Mambo, kind of Australian Jesus. I mean, R.M. Williams' idea of Jesus, like everybody pretty much has had not everybody, I'm overstating it, but many people, as you say, have had different takes on him. But your book opens with this quote from Picasso, that art is a lie that makes us realise the truth. I mean, what was it precisely that you, in this book, wanted to bring into focus with your imagined Jesus?
Well, I think well, various things. One of the things, of course, that's very striking for me was how angry Jesus was. And the resistance and the hostility, you know, towards him, and how he survived that. So, I mean, obviously his family were hostile towards him. They didn't think he should be doing what he did. So there was no support from his family. He stepped into a religious environment that was entirely against life, and he took that religious establishment on. And the group of friends, work colleagues who he chose were inadequate at best. And so it was a lonely path. So I am in awe at his resilience, and I'm in awe at his insight. So he dismantled religion really by saying, let's begin and end with attitudes, which is a fascinating thing to do, because a religion, of course, most institutional religion is not interested in attitudes. It's interested in attendance. It's interested in doctrinal statements
or behaviour.
It's not interested in attitudes. And so here's a remarkable man who is saying, let us start with attitudes, because actually that's what it is to be human. And I'm very impressed by that. But then I'm also very impressed by his courage, because I dream of being courageous myself, you know.